Hello, this is my Valorant settings guide. We're going to start with general and enemy highlight color. So there's actually some scientific stuff that we can talk about here. That yellow, you'll see a lot of people use yellow in this game. And the reason potentially for that is that yellow is the fastest we can see, or we react to it the fastest out of these colors. Potentially, don't know. Realistically, there are some studies on it, but I haven't found anything conclusive necessarily. And obviously it's up to personal preference for the most part. But a lot of people use yellow. A lot of people have success with yellow. So maybe it actually does hold some weight to have yellow on. At the end of the day, it is something that you would be complete personal preference. The stuff to do with like the scientific stuff around it is that we see yellow the fastest. Also green happens to be the color that we see the easiest in daylight, and yellow is the closest on the color spectrum out of these colors. So potentially that could be the stuff that means that we would like to use yellow outlines. Although I think red is also a colour that we see fairly fast too. So I don't think there's a massive difference between yellow and red. It's just personal preference, I think, maybe, between those two. So you do what you want. I personally prefer yellow. Just test out both. I would not recommend purple at all. But if you do have like any sort of colour blindness, and especially the one that actually says that wants purple, then probably want to try out purple. But I personally didn't like purple, but I think yellow is the best. For me personally, sensitivity I have a 0.24. Slowly I've been bringing it down. I used to be on 0.42. Now I'm on 0.24. I was on 0.2 for a bit, but it was a bit too slow for me. So now I'm on 0.24. My scope sensitivity multiplier is on 0.8, so a bit slower than this basically. And the reason why is because it's easier to hit easy shots when my scope sensitivity is just lower. I flick less basically. It's harder to land the hard shots though, but I don't really take many hard shots when I play the op. I generally am just holding angles that I know that people are going to come from, and it's very unlikely that I have to hit a hard shot anyway. ADS sensitivity multiplier, just keep that the same. It feels a lot more fluid when it's the same as your aim. Invert mouse I have off. I'm not sure if many people would even have that on. Raw input buffer I have on, although I want to look into this. Potentially it could be wrong for me. But we'll see. Well, I'll see when I get to it. But I'm pretty sure I would prefer it on. It's just raw. It's like raw input instead of basic cell, but I could be wrong on that. So the map, we're gonna make sure that we have the map fully visible to us at all times. So all the map visible to us at all times, which means that there are some settings. There is like one setting or two settings that you really need to make sure that are right. So you want to keep player centered off, and you want to make sure that the minimap size is, I think this is the minimum you can go before you can't see everything. You want to make sure you have mini map vision cones on. You don't have to have region names on, and it will back up to here. So fixed orientation, I always have the same. You can have base on side if you want, and you can also have a rotating map as well. You might need to lower this to have a rotating map, but on fixed this can see everything, at least as far as I remember. So yeah, I mean I always play with this, so it must do basically. But yeah, you can have a rotating map if you want. You can have a fixed map if you want. Either one is fine. Privacy stuff, it doesn't really matter. So first person handedness could be to do with your which eye is dominant. So my left eye is dominant, so I like to have my first person handedness on left. But you can just pick your personal preference, or you can use your dominant eye, one of the two. And there are plenty of videos to find out what your dominant eye is. So I'll let you go and figure that out if you want to. So show corpses and show blood are two of the like other big settings here. So show corpses I have off because most of the time, sometimes you could get the gun, like the gun that they dropped would be in the body, so you can't actually see it. So I like to have it off, and that's pretty much the only reason as well. Otherwise, it doesn't really change much. Maybe people could like take cover behind it potentially or something, but I don't think there's that many angles where that actually makes sense, or like it actually happens in reality. Show blood I have off. There are times where I'm at a disadvantage here, where someone with blood could actually see a blood spatter. This mainly happens when you body shot someone through like a corner or something. Then you can sometimes see like a blood spatter come out of their body, like sideways or horizontally, and that way you can actually tell they're behind the corner. But for me, like that, I personally just see the headshot when you headshot someone and the blood spatter goes up. I personally see the sparks better than I see the blood spatter, and obviously that could be personal preference once again. Red versus yellow type thing, where I prefer yellow here, so I prefer blood off, and maybe if you prefer red over here, you prefer blood on, and that's probably what it could be. Or it could be the other way around. Maybe I should actually have blood on because I've got yellow, so then it differentiates the colours, there's more contrast. But I don't know. That's like probably just a nuanced like discussion that doesn't actually mean that much. But basically this is just personal preference. Go blood or not. I personally just see it better to have it off. That's all observer stuff. We go on controls. So on controls, I personally have my bindings a bit messed up, a bit reshuffled, because I like to have my dash on C. The reason why I like to have my dash on C is because I can use my other fingers to move, like WASD, and then I can use the dash to just on my thumb. So then I don't have to worry about not moving a certain direction when I'm dashing and things like that. It made jet very much easier, and I actually have a raise change where it makes the blast pack C instead of like this ability, because generally this is the movement ability, but raise has it differently for some reason, so I had to change it for raise. But generally, yeah, this is how it looks for me. And then one other thing is there's one other thing, jump. Okay, so jump. I have a mouse wheel down. You want to make sure you have like, I would recommend having a mouse wheel because it's a lot easier to consistently bunny hop with a mouse wheel. With one of the mouse wheels here, mouse wheel down, mouse wheel up, or both. I personally like spacebar because when I'm doing lineups, I prefer the spacebar personally. But yeah, that's like personal preference. You can have both mouse wheels if you want. Equipment, there is just the aim down sight stuff. So I personally like to hold when I'm using like a Vandal or something. When I'm using normal guns. And I like to toggle when I've got the operator, but I was actually thinking I might try hold at some point. Just because I think it could be a bit more fluid. Although I think with the Marshall it might make more sense to have hold. It's a lot more of a faster gun, very similar to other guns. But the operator is much slower, so it might not make sense to have hold that much. It might make sense just to have the toggle. I also think that it's a lot more, the operator zoom is a lot easier to use when you have toggle on rather than hold. Personally, I have auto re-enter scope. You can have that off or on. I personally like it on because it means that I waste no time to put it back in, to zoom back in if I need to. And then what else is there? There's nothing else, I don't think. Spray, that stuff is important. Change. Okay, communication. So you need to make sure you have a mic in this game. I personally have mine on V. I've recently changed this. It did used to be on, not that one, it used to be on this one, this thumb button here. I personally don't recommend this. The reason why I don't recommend this, I've done it for 3 years now, or like basically since Valorant came out, the beta came out. I've done it since then. I can tell you from experience that this does not work as well as you would like it to, because when you actually start playing the game at like higher levels, you need to start communicating and shooting at the same time, right? There are going to be times when it's important to communicate and communicate and shoot at the same time, and having them on the same, like in the same place, aiming, shooting, and talking doesn't make much sense when I should be having it on my left hand, on my keyboard hand. So I put it on V now. I think a lot of people have it on V, to be honest. I think I'm actually in the minority putting it on my mouse, to be honest. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it from experience. And then all this stuff is like, if you want to say no and stuff in chat, that sort of stuff, like or yes or whatever, in like voice, in like the voice lines. And then we've got interface. I personally have this on semicolon, but I changed it. I don't know what even I changed it to or from, to be honest. Sorry, from. But yeah, it's like nice to have sometimes, just knowing what your teammates have sometimes. And then I have map toggle. You want to make sure you have this binded. You don't have to be toggle, it can be hold if you want. But you want to make sure you have this binded, open map, because it is one of the most important bindings in the game. And it allows you to ping anywhere on the map. So then you can do lineups, you can spam, you can do everything with this map, like with this binding, right? This map, like pings are broken, and this just makes pings even more broken. So I would recommend have this binded. Doesn't have to be on M. I personally like it on M because I used to play a lot. Well, I still do, honestly, play a lot of single player games that you press M and open the map. So it makes a lot of sense for me. Also playing like PUBG back in the day and things, that this is like M to open the map is just second nature basically to me. So I personally have it on M. But obviously you can do whatever you want with it. This observer stuff, so we can do that. No, crosshair. So with the cross, so I have the cross. Yeah, I've been using this since the end of the first champs, so quite a while. I used to use this beforehand. I used this normal, and sometimes every so often I would use this square. But basically, this was the main crosshair I was using for the first year, and then I've been using this one ever since. And then yeah, this sort of stuff, fade, crosshair, firing arrow I have on, but I don't know. You can have it off if you want it. Doesn't really matter, to be honest. I personally like it on, because I think it looks nicer when I'm spraying. Feels nicer when I'm spraying. And yeah, so it's a 1420 inner lines and no outer lines. That's pretty much it. Here is also white. You can have it. So crosshair color does have some like importance to what map you're playing sometimes. So for instance, most maps prefer blue, so they prefer this color, or they prefer more of a, I don't know actually. I actually do have. I wonder if I've still got it copied. That's the red. Okay, so basically red used to be the one for I can't remember what map it was. Red was Fracture? No, that was blue. That was Pearl. Pearl was red. Okay, so Pearl was red, Icebox was green, and basically every other map was blue. So generally cyan or like a darker blue, or like a slightly darker blue than cyan, will actually be the best color on average for your crosshair across all maps. Aside from Icebox and Pearl, I also don't know about Lotus and I don't know about Sunset because I haven't looked into them since those maps came out. But yeah, basically, for the most part, having a blue crosshair is actually going to be the best contrast on the maps. But personally, I prefer white for the most part. But you can, I think cyan is probably the best color in this game for a crosshair color. I also think green isn't too bad. I think white is probably the best. But yeah, it's up to you, really. I'm doing sights. I personally like the dot, as I feel like when I'm aiming in, I have so much clutter on my screen from the gun aiming in that it's nice to have a very small crosshair. As a result, personally, that's how I see it anyway. I mean, obviously you can make your own decisions about the crosshair mainly, but yeah, I prefer it like this. Sniper scope, I personally have centered opacity to 0.8 and then a thickness at 0.74. And basically this means just it's a bit smaller and it's a bit faded out. And I recommend having this centered on because it means it tells you basically if you're moving or not. So I recommend having this on. And then we've got the multi-threaded rendering, which we need to make sure we have on. General stuff, you make sure you have an FPS limit. Graphics settings, you want multi-threaded rendering on for sure, 100% of the time. I have all my settings on low, and I have vignette and VSync off. I have non-anti-aliasing and I can't say that, but yeah, 4 times on this. I don't particularly care about this sort of stuff. There's a chance that it makes more sense to have it higher for my system or lower for my system, but I just have it on this. I don't think it makes much difference. Personally, I haven't seen much difference with it, to be honest, so I have it all off. I probably should try it on at some point, but I have none on 4 times. So then we've got improved clarity, which I think I have on because it says if you have a high-end GPU, we recommend keeping this on, which I do have high-end GPU, so I have this on, so that's why you would have this on or off. With this, I have it on. I tried it on and off, and I prefer having my. So this makes the agents look like they're cell shaded a tiny bit to me, and I preferred that because it was very contrasted from the maps. The maps don't look very cell shaded to me, but for me, the actual enemies sometimes can look a bit cell shaded. With this on, I don't know how to explain them. Not necessarily cell shaded. It's just like the edges are way more defined, and there's a lot more like sort of like black space on them. So that's why I prefer this personally. But you can have that off or on. I probably would recommend you actually have it off. I think I'm in the minority with this one. And then I have bloom and distortion off, which I recommend to have off. Cast shadows always on, but it doesn't actually affect shadows in game. What this affects is like personal shadows. So enables dynamic cast on first person shadows. There you go. So it's just first person shadows. You can have it on or off. I prefer it on just because it makes my skins look cooler. And then stats wise, I have FPS and server tick rate on text only. But I have network and packet loss on text only. What I would actually recommend is you have it on graph. I might actually try graph with packet loss. It's a bit easier to see. But yeah, I have text only. You can also have so the reason why I have it on text only is because I have packet loss total on as well. So I have a lot of text on the top of my screen. But you can have this less cluttered if you want to. It's just really what you want is preference. But yeah, if you want to have anything, I recommend hide all. aside from FPS, and you would have like graph only. So you have this, you have hide on this, and you have text only, graph only. You have this. That's probably what I would recommend you have. And then graph only over here on shooting error. This is a pretty important graph I recommend most people have on. And that's kind of it for the video. Audio, sounds, it doesn't really matter. Make sure you have, I personally like HRTF. You don't actually have to have it on if you don't want it. I personally like it. Voice chat, you want to make sure you have a mic, as I already said. And this stuff, I just leave it the same. I actually didn't really realize this existed, but yeah, you can have this all on. Sometimes they will say like enemy spotted, the amount of enemies, so sometimes it's actually quite nice to have this on, especially in solo queue. But I can imagine like if you're like high low or like scrimming and things, and people are actually communicating like real humans, then this stuff being off probably doesn't actually make much difference. But yeah, I would recommend having this stuff on. So yeah, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next one.